والذين تبوأوا الدار والإيمان من قبلهم يحبون من هاجر إليهم ولا يجدون في صدورهم حاجة مما أوتوا ويؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة ومن يوق شح نفسه فأولئك هم المفلحون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Today inshallah we're going to do hadith number 15 from Nawawi's 40 hadith. So as usual, I will just start by reading the hadith out to you, and then we will read the translation of the hadith. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خير أو ليصمت، ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم جاره، ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم ضيفه. Rawah al-Bukhari wa Muslim. On the authority of Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, whoever believes in Allah and the last day should speak good or keep silent. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day should be courteous and generous to his neighbor. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day should be courteous and generous to his visitor. Recorded by Bukhari and Muslim. So, this is a hadith which applies to everyone, because apart from the other two categories mentioned in this hadith, speaking is something that applies to all of us across the board. We all speak, and so the guidelines for speaking is something that is very important for all of us to understand. Before we get into that, we will talk about the narrator, as we always do. So the narrator for this hadith is... Can anyone tell me? Yes, okay, very good. So I've got an answer here, Abu Huraira. So the narrator of the hadith is Abu Huraira, and we covered him in a lot of detail when we did hadith number 9. Inshallah, I will gradually try and send you links for all the previous durus, so whoever has missed the first few hadith, they can catch up, inshallah. So from those of you who attended that dars, I just want to know any 5 things that you can remember about Abu Huraira. So for example, can anybody tell me? Yes, very good. So he was from the Ahl Sufa, and he's one of the most, you could say, prolific people from the Ahl Sufa. Yes, he kept kittens. Can anyone tell me what his actual name was? Yes, very good. So there is difference of opinion on what his actual name was, but yes, that's the most agreed upon name for him. Abdurrahman ibn Sakhr ibn ad-Dawsi. Okay. Yes, he lived in the mosque. He spent 3 years with the Prophet ﷺ. Can you tell me when he was born and when he died? Yes, he narrated the most hadith. Does anybody know how many? So today we can give an exact number because we're talking about him. Okay, it's not 603, and he was not born... Okay, so 5,374 is the exact number. So the sister who said 5,300, that's the closest answer. So it's 5,374. Anybody know when he was born? Was he born before Hijrah or after? Okay, so he was born 17 years before Hijrah. Okay, and he died about 59 years after Hijrah. How old does that make him? Mathematicians out there? Excellent. Yeah, he's about 75 or 76 years old when he passed away. And like we said, he only spent about 3 years with the Prophet ﷺ, because he came into Islam quite late. So we've got some good number of facts about him. Yes, we know his name, Abdurrahman ibn Sakhr ibn ad-Dawsi. He died at the age of about 75 or 76. He's born 17 years before Hijrah, and he spends about 3 years with the Prophet ﷺ. He's narrated 5,374 hadith. And Abu Huraira was his kunya because he was very fond of kittens, and he would keep a kitten in his sleeve. Yes. So those are some basic things. If you remember, I told you some really amazing things, stories about his memory and how the Prophet ﷺ made dua for his memory, and he never forgot a hadith after that. So these are just some basic things about Abu Huraira. Now, getting into the hadith. So if you remember, I mentioned to you that when we talk about a hadith related to etiquette, if you remember, I said that the source of etiquettes from the Prophet ﷺ's teachings, they are summarized in 4 narrations. So I mentioned them last time because the last hadith was also part of a hadith on etiquette. So you could say that all of etiquette is summarized in these 4 narrations. Can anyone remind me what those 4 are? So one of them is the hadith, yes, very good. Leave that which does not concern you. I'm asking about the 4 narrations which they sum up the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ on etiquette. Yes, very good. Don't get angry. Love for your brother what you love for yourself. Leave that which does not concern you. And this one that we are doing today. Speak good or keep silent. Be courteous to your neighbor and be generous to your guest. So these are the 4 hadith which contain the basic teachings on etiquette. We know that our deen is divided into huququllah and huququl ibad. The rights of Allah and the rights of the servants of Allah, or the slaves of Allah. And this hadith, it concentrates on huquq al-ibad, on the rights that people have on you, different categories of people. Now, when we say whoever believes in Allah and the last day should do X, Y, Z, does it mean that if you didn't do X, Y, Z, it means that you don't believe in Allah and the last day? What do you understand when the Prophet ﷺ says whoever believes in Allah and the last day should do A, B, C? So it basically just means that the completeness of your iman or the completeness of your belief depends on these characteristics. Yes, so some people have said traits of a Muslim. Okay, so yes, so these are the characteristics of a good believer. These are the characteristics of a righteous person. So if you don't have these characteristics, it means that your faith is deficient or that your iman is deficient. It does not mean that you don't believe in Allah in the last day. It just means that your belief is deficient and you need to work on your belief. So you will understand what I'm trying to say as we progress and as I explain the hadith to you further, inshallah. So by not doing these actions, like for example, if you're not good to your neighbor, or if you're not good to your visitor, or your speech is not entirely good, it does not mean that you have lost all your faith, but it just means that these are the attributes of a believer and you are lacking in them, and you need to work until you can make these characteristics part of your behavior or your characteristics. Or you could say that a believer will ensure that he carries these characteristics. So this is the sign of a good believer. And also you could say that it also means that a person who believes in Allah and the Akhirah, he would try very hard to inculcate these characteristics in his personality, because it does not suit him to leave these actions out or to do otherwise. Now, some of the people, they asked that why is it that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned these 2 pillars of Iman? Why is it that the Prophet ﷺ did not say whoever believes in the messengers and the books and the angels? Why did he not mention any of the other pillars of Iman? Anybody have anything that they would like to say about that? Do you have any idea what is the significance of mentioning this instead of anything else? Okay, so let me tell you. The scholars have come up with a number of reasons. I'm going to tell you 3 possible reasons. Of course, we don't know exactly, what is the reason, but this is what the scholars have deduced. So firstly, belief in Allah is the foundation of your faith, right? Everything builds up on top of that. So if you are lacking in that pillar, then everything else is meaningless after that. So that is you could say, the crux, or the main foundation, the core of your faith. And what is built up on top of that is accountability to Him. So belief in Allah is the foundation, and everything else that we do is built on top of that. The way we behave with people, the way we behave towards Allah, the way we behave with our neighbors, all of these things, they are built up on top of that foundation, and that leads to accountability to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason they said is that these two are mentioned to remind you of your journey, that it starts from Allah and it ends with Allah. So in the beginning, you started, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you, so you started from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you end on the day of judgment in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with accountability and answering to Him for your deeds. The third reason they gave is that these two pillars, they strike the perfect balance between hope and fear, or between mercy and fear. So when you talk about belief in Allah, you think of rahmah, you think of having hope that Allah will forgive you, Allah will have mercy on you, Allah will enter you into His Janan. And when you talk about the Day of Judgment, when you talk about Yawm al-Qiyamah, you feel a sense of accountability, a sense of responsibility, a sense of fear. You imagine standing on that day, sweating, worrying. You don't know what your fate is going to be. So it's almost like there's a perfect balance between these two pillars. And so some of the scholars said that, this is why these two are used. Mind you, there are many ahadith, many narrations, and also verses in the Quran where Allah just mentions these two pillars, and it is almost as if everything else comes under the umbrella of believing in Allah and believing in the last day. Everything else comes under that umbrella. So if you believe in these two things, it's a given that you believe in all the other pillars. So the Prophet ﷺ started by saying, whoever believes in Allah and the last day, and I've explained to you why he chose those two. Perhaps, this is our understanding from what the scholars have said. So I was just going to say that there are some ahadith which deal, like I said, with the rights of Allah. So they revolve around our relationship with Allah, our dealing with Allah, how we behave towards Allah, etc. This hadith revolves around our relationship with people and how we interact with people. And this is very, very important. The word insan, the root word anasa, or ins, it means, it has a number of meanings. One of the meanings is that we are beings who need to be around other people. We can't be alone or on our own. We need company, we need companionship. The only being who can be by himself on his own is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everybody else needs someone or something else. So this hadith, it teaches us the etiquette of our relationships with each other and how we should deal with each other. So the next part of the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said is very, very concise but very profound. He said, whoever believes in Allah and the last day should speak good things or keep silent. So these are very few words, but they have a depth of meaning. So as we can see from these words, that in Islam we are accountable for what we say. That's why we should speak if it is good, and we should keep silent if what we are going to say is not good. This was something that even Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he was perplexed by this. And I mentioned this in one of our previous hadith, but I will mention it again. He said to the Prophet ﷺ, he once asked the Prophet ﷺ, are we to be taken to account for what we say? And the Prophet ﷺ answered him, he said, ثَكِلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ يَا مُعَاذ وَهَلْ يَكُبُّ النَّاسِ فِي النَّارِ عَلَى وُجُوهِهِمْ أَوْ عَلَى مَنَاخِرِهِمْ إِلَّا حَسَائِدْ أَلْسِنَتِهِمْ. O Mu'adh, may your mother be bereaved of you. Is there anything that topples people on their faces or on their noses into the hellfire other than what their tongues reap? Speech is something which you could say is like a double-edged sword. It could be for you or it could be against you. And that's why it needs a lot of attention. And we really need to focus and pay attention to what we say and when we say it and how we say it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reminds us and emphasizes this in the Quran when Allah says in Surah Al-Qaf, I'm just going to read the last part of the ayah, where Allah says, مَا يَلْفِظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ. Not a word does he utter, but there is a watcher by him ready to record it. You know, subhanAllah, this is something that we read so many times. We are aware that there are angels, they're writing all our deeds. But subhanAllah, you know, today I was sitting and I was preparing the dars and the class and my notes. And this, I don't know, this really, really hit me hard, because I was just trying to analyze and dissect this and just think to myself that I think the reason we don't really pay attention to this is because we can't really process how this is happening. But every single word that comes out of our mouth, whether it's lyrics of a song, whether it is humming, whether it is telling our children off, whether it is yelling at our husband, whether it is, you know, reciting Quran, doing adhkar, whatever comes out of our mouth, the angels are writing every single thing down. And like I said, we already know this, but you know, as I was preparing this, it was just huge. And I was just thinking that if this tape is played on the Day of Judgment, where everybody is standing and everybody is listening to what is, you know, everybody's listening to each person's tape. I'm just thinking, is this something that I don't mind anyone listening to? Is this something that I'm really going to be embarrassed by? It's really something to think about. And that is what makes you think that, how careful are you with your speech? Because a lot of the time, you know, we just say whatever we want to say because we think that, oh, nobody's listening to me, you know, I can go and I can just slaughter my child because, you know, my daughter or my son, because he did this or he did that, or I'm just going to go and I'm going to tell my husband exactly how it is, or I'm just going to go and have it out with my neighbor or the shopkeeper or whatever, you know. And sometimes these things can be really embarrassing if you, like there was this one brother, you know, he said that he had a serious problem with anger and with his temper. And he said that he really struggled with anger management until one day, he said, somebody recorded another person losing their temper, and they replayed that recording, and he saw it. And he saw how ugly it looked. And he saw how awful it looked. And that really... that's the day, he said, that he learned anger management. Just by seeing someone losing their cool and seeing it replayed. And I think sometimes, you know, it would be a really interesting activity, since we all have smartphones and we have these fancy, you know, computers and iMacs and laptops and whatnot, to just one day just turn on the recording and just record your day. You can always delete it. It's not going to kill your memory because you can delete it. But just to record yourself the whole day and just see what is going on in your life. What are the angels busy writing? You know, are they writing things that will make you proud on the Day of Judgment? Are they writing things that will be for you, that will be in your favor on the Day of Judgment? Or are they writing all the lahu and all the lahu and all the nonsense that is coming out of your mouth? And, you know, is this something is this the way you want to carry on, or is this something you need to change? I think only when we hear ourselves back can we decide that, yes, I think I can carry on like this, or we decide, you know what, I need to change today. I need to change now. Because naturally, it's easy to be very courteous and polite when you're in front of people. But How are you when there are no people around you, or when it's just people within your home? So really, it's the people within your home who can really tell you what you're like and what your speech is like throughout the day. And of course, again, we have to be very careful with our speech, because this is part of our actions. And as you may or may not know, our actions are presented to Allah daily, weekly, and annually. So, obviously, every day our actions are presented to Allah. Does anybody know on which days of the week our actions are presented to Allah?
Monday and Thursday.
Yes, very good. Monday and Thursdays. And does anybody know annually which month our deeds?
15th Shaban.
So Shaban, yes, the date, Allahu Alam, Allah knows best, but yes, our deeds are presented to Allah in Shaban. And that is perhaps one of the reasons that, as you know, the Prophet ﷺ, why did he used to fast on Mondays and Thursdays? He said that my deeds are presented to Allah on Mondays and Thursdays, and I like to be in a state of fasting when my deeds reach Allah. And similarly, he would fast most of Sha'ban because our deeds, our yearly deeds, are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Sha'ban. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those whose deeds are good and pleasing to Him, and we make dua that Allah is pleased with us with the annual presentation of our deeds to Him in this month. So this month is very important in that sense. So yes, our speech is part of those actions, which is presented, and so we have to really be careful of how we are, using that speech. And yes, I know for some of you it's a new thing to hear that our deeds are presented in Shaban. But yes, okay. Again, this is something that I when I was a teenager I read this, and it really it had a really strong impact on me. So I wanted to read this hadith to you. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, إن العبد ليتكلم بالكلمة من رضوان الله لا يلقي لها بالا يرفعه الله بها درجات وإن العبد ليتكلم بالكلمة من سخط الله لا يلقي لها بالا يهوي بها في جهنم. A servant makes a statement that is so pleasing to Allah, although he himself does not give it much concern, that Allah raises him levels due to it. And a servant makes a statement that is so displeasing to Allah, although he himself does not give it much concern, that he is thrown because of it into hell. Recorded by Bukhari. And as you may have heard, once one of the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, she made a statement about one of the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ. And it was a very small thing. Like she said, I'm sorry, I can't remember accurately. If somebody else remembers, then you can remind me. But I think she said something like, like we would say that someone is too fat, or is too short, or is this or that. I mean, we don't really pay much attention when we say, oh, such and such is short, or such and such is stocky, or, we use these kind of statements and words, and we don't really pay much attention to it. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said to her, he said, if your words were put into the ocean, it would turn the entire ocean bitter. I'm sorry, I have to draw your attention to this, but, I have seen seas, but the first time I saw an ocean, I was really awestruck. It is huge. It is massive. And for the Prophet ﷺ to say something like that, this is a really, really big thing that we don't even pay attention to it. So yes, that is a very important hadith, that gives us an indication of the seriousness of our speech, of the magnanimity of what we say, and we don't realize it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking note of everything we say, how we say it, when we say it, who we say it to. all these things are being recorded, and so we have to really take care. So the Salaf, they were very careful about speaking too much, and they realized that if they were not careful with the use of their tongue, they could easily fall into sin. And Umar radiallahu anhu once said, the one who speaks a lot commits lots of mistakes. The one who makes a lot of mistakes commits a lot of sins. The one who commits a lot of sins will have the hellfire as the first place for him. And so they were aware, they were very, very aware of their speech leading them into trouble. You know, people like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, who the Prophet ﷺ refers to as as-Siddiq. You know, when you hear the word as-Siddiq, or you hear the title as-Siddiq, he's the first person who comes to your mind. And he said that he would hold his tongue and say that this has got me to places. So, you know, if this is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, then, you know, this is definitely something that we have to be very, very conscientious about how, you know, we are using our tongue and what we are saying. Okay, now, talking about speaking good things, Ibn Hajar, he has mentioned the 5 worst things you can say and the 5 best things you can say. So, can anybody tell me, what do you think is 1 or 2 of the 5 worst things that you can say? Okay, so somebody said slander, swearing. Okay, so that's very good. That's reminding others of a favor you have done for them. Okay, so you guys have mentioned some of these things. So the top of the list is a type of lying, which is kufr. Okay, so that's one of the worst things that you can say is kufr. You know, saying something bad about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second thing, according to Ibn Hajar's list, is to speak about the deen of Allah without knowledge. And Allah mentions this in many places in the Quran, where He says, أَتَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And in a number of places, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes reference to that, to saying things about Allah without knowledge. The third thing that Ibn Hajar mentioned is namima. Does anyone know what namima is? Okay, so it's similar to backbiting, but it's not exactly backbiting. Namima is actually quite a nasty thing to do. It's spreading information about other people with the purpose of causing a problem or dissent. So it's with an evil intention that you spread information about a certain person within the community. And, you know, it's sort of like to give a bad reputation to that person. So you go to various people and you say, oh, you know, such and such is like this, or such and such is like this. So it is, yeah, it's gossip is a more, like, you could say, a broad term, but namima specifically, it's a specific sin, which the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned in the Hadith, where he talked about the people who are being punished in their grave. So it is really spreading information about other people with the purpose of causing, you know, trouble. So that's namima. So the first thing was kufr. Second thing is speaking about the deen of Allah without knowledge. Number 3 is namima. Number 4 is backbiting, which is ghiba, which is different from namima, ghiba. And ghiba, as you know, it's a major sin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has likened it to eating the flesh of your brother. And it is speaking about people, about things that they would not like to be mentioned behind their back. So that is ghiba. And the last thing that is on his list is lying. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said something specific about lying. Lying is a very, very serious thing. I don't think we give as much weight to lying as we should in terms of its harms. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Alaykum bis-sidq, فإن الصدق يهدي إلى البر وإن البر يهدي إلى الجنة وما يزال الرجل يصدق ويتحرى الصدق حتى يكتب عند الله صديقا وإياكم والكذب فإن الكذب يهدي إلى الفجور وإن الفجور يهدي إلى النار وما يزال الرجل يكذب ويتحرى الكذب حتى يكتب عند الله كذابا. You must adhere to honesty, for honesty leads to righteousness, and verily righteousness leads to paradise. A person continues being honest and seeking honesty until he is recorded with Allah as an honest person. You must remain away from lying, for lying leads to wickedness, and verily wickedness leads to the fire. A person continues lying and seeking falsehood until he is recorded with Allah as a liar. And so lying is a very, very serious sin and a serious evil way to use your tongue. So those are the 5 worst things that you can say. What are the 5 best things that you can say with your tongue? Any answers? Okay, very good. Quran, dhikr of Allah. Okay, very good. So I've got a number of answers here which are very good. So the first thing on the list is what Allah mentions in Surah Al-Fussilat. The best thing to do is invite people back to the way of Allah. Okay, so a lot of things come under that category. Dawah, nasiha, durus, anything through which you will invite people back to the way of Allah. Anything that you will do that calls people, back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the number 1 best way to use your tongue. Number 2 is dhikr. And what is the best form of dhikr? Yes, Quran. Quran is the best form of dhikr. Okay? So reciting Quran is the best form of dhikr. Of course, there's lots of dhikr, like istighfar is dhikr, sending salat and salam on the Prophet ﷺ is dhikr, saying la ilaha illallah is dhikr. But the best form of dhikr is Quran. Number 3 on the list of the best things that you can use your tongue for is dua, which is also an ibadah. And number 4 is istighfar. And number 5 is inspiring happiness into people. So saying something that will make people happy or make people feel happy, such as complimenting them, saying something pleasant to them, giving them some good news, telling them something positive, giving them positive support or reassurance. All of these things, they come under this category of using your tongue in a good way. So that's all about speech. In terms of remaining silent, there has to be a balance when it comes to staying silent. And it's important to know when to speak and when to remain silent. So when you think that your speech is going to be of benefit, then you should speak. When you think that your speech is neutral and it's not going to bring benefit and it's not going to bring harm, then it's better to keep quiet. And when you think that what you're going to say is harmful, then it is better to keep quiet. And when you think that you should speak, but you keep quiet, then that is harmful. So if that is clear, so you speak when it is beneficial. When you have neutral things to say, which are neither here nor there, you keep quiet. When you are going to say something harmful, you keep quiet. When it is needed for you to say something, then it is harmful for you to keep quiet. At that time, you should speak. You should say it. And of course, the golden rule before you open your mouth and you say something, because you know that you cannot take those words back, is to think before you speak. And the way you think before you speak, your gate stick or your guideline for speech is what I'm going to say, is it pleasing to Allah or is it displeasing to Allah? That is your main litmus, or that's how you decide whether you should speak or you should not. If you think what you're about to say is pleasing to Allah, you should say it. If you think it is not, then you should keep quiet. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said a really amazing thing, mashallah, which I was going to mention at the end, but it's nice to mention it now. The Prophet ﷺ he was once asked by a man. A man came to him and he said to the Prophet ﷺ, advise me in a succinct and concise manner. So I want advice, but I want it very brief. I don't want lengthy advice. And the Prophet ﷺ, he told him three things. One of the things he told him was, لا تكلم بكلام تعتذر منه غدا. Do not say any word that will have that you will have to apologize for tomorrow. So this is a very, very golden piece of advice that we should all try and implement, that we should be careful of what we say, because once we've said it, we can't take it back. So instead of putting yourself in a situation where now you have to apologize for what you said, just be careful from before you've actually said those words. So the next thing that we come to is the next part of the hadith, which is the Prophet ﷺ said that should be courteous and generous to his neighbor. So the one who believes in Allah and the last day should be courteous and generous to his neighbor. Again, this hadith, it demonstrates your relationship with people around you, people you're interacting with, people you are living with. And so again, it is continuing to teach you etiquettes of interacting with, basically social etiquette is what this hadith is teaching you. So now, when we talk about the neighbor, I don't know if it's just in this country or if generally we have lost the concept of neighbors and interacting with neighbors. And what I'm talking about is a lot of interaction with neighbors. So I think most people nowadays, they have lost this characteristic, and most people just sort of like keep to themselves, and they're happy that way. So they will interact with neighbors occasionally when it's needed, just a brief, quick, wave from far or something like that. But we don't really know what's happening in our neighbors' homes. We don't know if they have a problem, if they're happy, if they're sad, if they're hungry, if they're having a financial problem. We have no idea what is happening in their homes. So this is really something which has sort of like died, I feel, nowadays in our communities. Initially, I did feel that when I first came here, because I live in a predominantly Saudi area, so most of my neighbors are Saudi, and we felt that they weren't too keen on interacting with non-Saudis. So I don't know culturally what the situation is and what the dynamics are, but I think even back home, wherever we come from, whether it's from the UK or India, Pakistan, America, wherever we come from, I think generally our neighborly dynamics are very, very poor and very weak. And so this is something really that we do need to work on, because the Prophet ﷺ and our deen, it stresses heavily on this aspect. And as a Muslim, even if our neighbors are culturally different from us, we do have a responsibility towards them as Muslims, because our deen teaches us that we have a responsibility towards neighbors to reach out to them and to try and connect with them, to try and establish some kind of bond or some kind of interaction with them. This is just our you could say, our Islamic responsibility. Now, before we carry on, we need to understand who is a neighbor, or what is the Shari'i definition of a neighbor. So I'm just going to quickly tell you, there are a number of opinions. There's about 5 opinions that I have here, and then I will tell you what the conclusion of that is, but I'm just going to quickly tell you what some of the opinions are. So the first opinion is that a person's neighborhood extends 40 houses in each direction. So 40 houses to the front, 40 houses to the back, 40 houses to the right, 40 houses to the left. How many houses is that? That's just a simple maths question. Anyone?
160.
Yes, that's right. So that's about 160 houses. And okay, we'll try and take some questions afterwards, because it's interesting to discuss this topic, especially since this is not anybody's strength nowadays. But So that's one opinion about the 40 houses. The second opinion is, by the way, just for your information, according to the Shafi'is and most of the Hanbalis, they feel this is the correct opinion. A second opinion that was held by, was the opinion of Abu Hanifa, is that one's neighbors are only those whose houses are adjoining either from the back or the front or the sides. So it's those people whose homes are immediately next to you, from all four sides, you could say, immediately adjacent to you. Those are your neighbors. The view of Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, also from the Hanafi school, was the third opinion, which is that it is the adjoining houses and others in an area, all of whose inhabitants pray in the same masjid. So all the people you see regularly in the masjid, wherever their homes are, they are your neighbors. This was the third opinion. The fourth opinion is that it refers to everyone who lives in a certain district or a certain city. So let's limit it to district. So for example, if you live in a certain hay, like let's say you live in Ta'awun, so people living in Ta'awun are your neighbors. Or if you live in, for example, Rawda, everybody living in Rawda could be considered to be like your neighbors because they live in the same area as you. And similarly, whichever country you're talking about, if you're in the UK or wherever else, each area, you could say, is what this opinion is saying, are your neighbors. And these are the four main opinions. Now, there is somebody called Abdurrahman Fay'i, who did a thesis, a master's thesis on this topic of neighbors. And and he did, obviously he did a detailed research and all these opinions, the evidences, the hadith supporting it, not supporting it, authentic, not authentic, etc. And he came to the conclusion that the evidences were lacking, and so these opinions he felt were not valid because the evidences were lacking. So he came to the conclusion that the opinion of Ibn Qudama, the Hanbali jurist, is the most accurate. And Ibn Qudama, he said that since the Sharia has not laid a clear-cut or exact definition of who your neighbor is, it's based on urf. Urf is basically like custom, in the sense that what does the word neighbor in your language mean to you? Or what does the word neighbor customarily in your, within your culture, what does it mean? So they left it to that, and they said that it's really what each person feels is their neighbor. So, for example, I live in Nuzha. I might think that somebody who lives in Ta'awun is still my neighbor because they're really close. So it just depends on really who you consider is your neighbor, and you feel that, I owe this to them, or I should look after them, or I should look out for them. So that is the definition, the Shari'i definition of the neighbor is according to your custom or your understanding, language, custom, whatever you'd like to say. But there are many ahadith relating to neighbors and their rights. And so I'm just going to tell you some of the things that the Prophet ﷺ said in regards to the neighbor. In terms of generosity to the neighbor, the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا زَالَ يُوصِينِي جِبْرِيلُ بِالْجَارِ حَتَّى ظَنَنْتُ أَنَّهُ سَيُوَرِّثُهُ. He said that Jibreel kept advising me concerning the neighbor to the point that I thought he would inherit from his neighbor. This is recorded by Bukhari. So basically, the Prophet ﷺ is just saying that Jibreel alayhi salam was bringing him so many you could say rights of the neighbor, that the Prophet ﷺ said, I started to think that the next thing will be that they will inherit from us. So this is the extent to which the neighbors have rights from us. Also, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir fala yu'thi jarahu." Whoever believes in Allah and the last day should not harm his neighbor. again, harm is not, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be throwing rocks into their house. But you can harm your neighbor in many ways. You can harm them by noise. You can harm them by banging doors. You can harm them by parking in front of their house, or your guests parking in front of their house. You can harm them in many different ways. Sometimes neighbors will get irritated if your trees or your plants are hanging in their side, and leaves are dropping into their courtyard, or just different things with different people. Living in apartments is even more complex in that sense, because you have to be even more conscientious that you're not disturbing anyone. I still remember my father, he would always pick on us for pulling chairs and tables, because he would say that you're going to disturb people who are living below us. And it was just not something that we used to think about. But yes, he's correct in saying that when we're dragging furniture and jumping, kids running, thumping on the floor, this is all going to cause disturbance. So this is all comes under harm. Also, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, of course, also just to mention, since I have mentioned those things, smells, pouring water or throwing trash outside, all of these things are harmful to your neighbor. So, for example, when you're washing your courtyard or something, just make sure that you're not you're not causing wet mud to form in front of your neighbor's house because you decided to wash your courtyard, or just try and take care of these things. The Prophet ﷺ also said to Abu Dhar, he said, Ya Abu Dhar, إذا طبخت مرقة فأكثر معها وتعاهد جيرانك. Oh, Abu Dhar, when you prepare stew, or something which has got gravy or soup, increase its water and deliver it to some of your neighbors. This is reported by Muslim. So the Prophet ﷺ is encouraging us to share our blessings or our food with our neighbors. Now, a very, very important thing. Sorry, I'm just going to tell you one other hadith, and then I'm going to tell you the last point about the neighbors that I was going to tell you. The Prophet ﷺ said, ثلاثة يحبهم الله الرجل يكون له الجار يؤذيه جواره فيصبر على أذاه حتى يفرق بينهما موت أو ضعن. There are three people who Allah loves. One of them is a man who is being harmed by his neighbor, but he is patient until they are separated by death or one moves away. So being patient in bearing the harm that comes to you from your neighbor is also a very praiseworthy characteristic. A very important thing that the Prophet ﷺ advised us is, he said that إذا سمعتهم يقولون قد أحسنت فقد أحسنت وإذا سمعتهم يقولون قد أسأت فقد أسأت. If you hear them saying you have done well, then you have done well. And if you hear them saying you have done evil, then you have done evil. What do you understand from what he is saying here? So when he is saying, if you hear them saying you have done well, then you have done well. If you hear them saying you have done evil, then you have done evil. What do you understand from this? Anyone? Yes, very good. Excellent, yes. So you see, the way you behave with your neighbor is a pretty accurate picture of who or what you really are. So their perception of you is very important. And again, subhanallah, when I was going through this, I was just thinking to myself that do we ever even stop and think that what does my neighbor think of me? What does my neighbor think of me as a person? Yes, my friends love me, but what does my neighbor think of me? How comes this kind of description is not being expected from, for example, your relatives or somebody else like that? Actually, it is expected from your relative as well. I'm just trying to think. There's another hadith which mentions three people. Ibn Abdul Barr, he said, this is not a hadith, He said, if a person has three qualities, then there can be no doubt about his intelligence and virtue. These three qualities are that he is praised by his neighbors, relatives, and companions. And there is another saying that I have. If you want to look at the righteousness of an individual, then ask three people. Number one, his spouse. Number two, his neighbors. And number three, his close companions or his close friends. So your spouse, your neighbor, your relatives, your best friend, these are all people who can give a more or less accurate indication of what kind of person you are. And so this is again something to think about, for us, that what is our reputation with our relatives? What is our reputation with our neighbor? What do our neighbors think of us? And of course, what does our spouse think of us? And people who are very, very close to us, who have seen us in our good times and in our difficult times. So yes, our dealing with our neighbor is very, very important, and it holds more weight than we expect. The other thing to try and understand is, although I've given you a Shar'i definition of who a neighbor is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a verse in Surah An-Nisa, He mentions, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ والجار ذي القربى والجار الجنب والصاحب بالجنب وابن السبيل وما ملكت أيمانكم إن الله لا يحب من كان مختالا فخورا. Worship Allah and join none with Him in worship, and do good to parents, relatives, orphans, the poor who beg, the neighbor who is a near of kin, the neighbor who is a non-relative, the companion by your side, the wayfarer you meet, and what your right hands possess. Verily, Allah does not like such as are proud and boastful. And so here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned three categories of neighbors, you could say. And so I'm just going to end about the neighbors with this, you could say, division of, what kind of neighbors you are likely to have. So the first category is that he is Muslim, and he is a neighbor, and he is a relative. So a Muslim relative lives next door to you and is your neighbor. So he has got three rights on you. He has got the rights of a Muslim to another Muslim, the rights of a neighbor to another neighbor, and the rights of a relative. The second possibility is that you have a Muslim neighbor who's not a relative. And so he's got two rights on you, the rights of a Muslim and the rights of a neighbor. And the third possibility is that you have a non-Muslim neighbor. So he only has one right on you, and that is the right of a neighbor. And even though we say that that is one right, that is a huge right. So you can imagine those who are related to you and who are Muslim, how many more rights they have on us. And really, these are things for us to just stop and think about and analyze, and it's huge. Okay, so that takes us to the last part of this hadith, which is that the one who believes in Allah and the last day should be courteous and generous to his visitor. Now, this visitor is not talking about somebody who comes to your house for tea. This visitor is talking about someone who comes to stay with you out of town. Someone who comes from out of town or out of his city, and he comes to your city and he stays with you. So we're talking about that kind of visitor. Even though the word ضيف, it means both types of visitors, but this meaning has been extracted from other narrations, and this is what the scholars have understood, that this is being referred to somebody who comes to stay with you. Now, the first thing that we have to try and understand is that, is it obligatory or is it voluntary to house this visitor? If you have any idea or any answers, you're welcome to give it. Is it obligatory or voluntary to house a guest who has come from out of town? Okay, so it's interesting, mashallah, that most of you are saying that it is voluntary. And yes, it is a good action, and it is an opportunity for ajr, but okay. So the majority of the scholars are of the opinion that hosting in general is a recommended and not an obligatory action. Their opinion is based on the fact that unless there is a clear command or there is a clear punishment mentioned for not doing an action or for doing an action, that action is voluntary and not obligatory. Okay, so some people are not sure what the question is. So the question was that, is hosting a guest who has come out of town, is it an obligation on you, or is it something that is voluntary? So you have the option of saying no, basically. So that's the majority of opinion. However, Ash-Shawkani, he has smashed that argument, and he said that it is obligatory, at least for the first day, to host the guest. And he gave two main reasons for saying that. Number one, he said that the way the hadith is worded, and it says, فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ, he said it's like a command. It's like you're being told that be generous to your guest. It's not giving you an option that it would be nice if you were generous. It is saying be generous. So he said it's a command. So that's why he said that you're obliged to do it. The second evidence he gave from that same hadith is that, sorry, I didn't read the hadith to you. I'm just going to read the hadith to you. مَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ جَائِزَتُهُ يَوْمٌ وَلَيْلَةٌ وَضِيَافَهُ 3 أيام فما بعد ذلك فهو صدقة ولا يحل له أن يثوي عنده حتى يحرجه. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day should be generous to his guest. His ja'iza, or his special gift, is 1 day and night. So what is obliged or what is obligated on you towards the guest is 1 day and 1 night. He is to be entertained for 3 days. Whatever is beyond that is an act of charity. It is not lawful for a guest to stay with his host to the point that he makes things difficult for him. And this is recorded by Bukhari. And so Shawkani said that here in this hadith, the word is fal yukrim, which is be generous. So it is a command. And the second proof he gave is that the Prophet ﷺ said beyond the 3 days is sadaqah or charity. So he said that within those 3 days, it is not sadaqah, it is obligation. And so that's the opinion he held, and that's how he said that, that's the evidence he gave for what he, for his opinion. And although it is the opinion of a small minority of the scholars, it seems to be the strongest opinion. So the majority of scholars said that it is voluntary. A minority of scholars said it is obligatory, and it seems to be the strongest opinion. That at least at that time, if you imagine, when people came into a new town or a new city and they don't know anyone, they have to be hosted by someone because they didn't really have, anywhere else to go, or, obviously in those days there was no guest house or hotels or, any of this. So people had to be hosted by other people. And so their right was a day and a night. That was the absolute minimum that you have to do. And then 3 days, like some of you mentioned, is better. And of course, nobody was forced to do beyond their capacity. So you would only have to host if you were capable of hosting, if you had the means to host someone. However, for people who did not have the means to host and they still hosted, they got extra reward for that action. I don't know if any of you are aware of the story of a man who hosted a guest of the Prophet ﷺ, and he had nothing in his house, but he wanted to honor the Prophet ﷺ's request, and so he hosted this man. And when he came to his wife, he said to her, he said, what do we have in terms of food? I'm hosting a guest of the Prophet ﷺ, and I want to be generous to him. I want to look after him. I want to be hospitable, and I want to give him something. And she looked at him, and she's in a bit of shock that what's he doing? He's come home with someone. They have nothing in their house. As I've said to you many, many times, the Sahaba in general, they were very, very poor. They hardly had anything. And so she said that the only thing I have right now is the ta'amu sibya. She said, I only have the children's food. Even them as parents, they were not going to get anything to eat. She had small children, and she just had a little bit of food for them. And he said to her, please serve that food to the guest. And he said, we'll handle the children. And so they brought the food in a dish, and they put it in front of the guest. And what he did was, this Sahabi, subhanallah, these people, they're like the superheroes, and we don't even know some of their names. And he dimmed the lights so that they couldn't really see what was going on. And he pretended to eat, because obviously the guest is going to feel very uncomfortable that the host is sitting and looking at me and I'm just eating. So that will make the guest feel very uneasy. So to make him feel comfortable, they put the plate out, and he would put his hand in the plate, but he wouldn't pick up any food because there was hardly any food to start with. And so the guest ate to his fill, and this man, he just kept pretending to eat until the food was finished. And in the back of the house, the mother, she had to deal with the children who are very hungry, and they're crying, and they're saying to her that we want food. So she put a big pot over the fire, and she put stones into that pot along with water, and she kept stirring it. And they kept crying and saying to her, we're hungry, we want food. And she kept stirring the pot. She said, I will give it to you as soon as it's ready. And she kept doing that until they fell asleep. And they fell asleep hungry because they were so hungry. They didn't have the energy to do anything else, so they fell asleep. And the guest, alhamdulillah, he ate, and he was, given a place to sleep. And it is said in this, in the narration of the story, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He smiled at this household, or at this man, for the great sacrifice he made to honor the guest of the Prophet ﷺ. These are the stories we need to tell our children. These are the stories that will make heroes out of them, that will make them into, that will develop their character. And as you may or may not know, but if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala smiles at you, then that's it. That's all you need. You don't need anything else. That means you've earned Allah's mercy and His rahmah. And you are, that Allah is pleased with you. Imagine, for Allah to smile at you. And you can imagine what a big action this was for that man to do. To take out the morsel from his children's mouth, to give it to the guest of the Prophet ﷺ, because he's hosting him. So these are people who were not in a position to host. They were not able to host someone, but they still did it. And they did it after making a sacrifice. So these people have a much higher station and a much higher status. And so our deen is not forcing this on us, but it is telling us that if you do it, then you get, your ajr is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that brings us to the end of this. I think it's a very, very important hadith, because it is something that it touches on something that we do on a daily basis. It gives us instructions on something that we do every single day of our life, which is, speaking and interacting with our neighbors. So, this is a very, very important hadith. So just to conclude and to close off. Oh yes, there was another thing I was going to tell you, but I'll tell you now in the conclusion. The first thing is that belief in Allah and the last day inspires us to do good deeds. And what we learn from this hadith is that believing in Allah and the last day is the main thing we need to inculcate in our children's hearts and in ourselves, to try to do as much good as possible. Because as long as we know that we have to stand in front of Allah and we have to give accountability for what we are saying, for what we are doing, for the way we are behaving, we will try to be careful of the way we behave. The minute we forget that is when we will slip and we will lose track. On the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will seal our mouth, and we will not be able to speak to defend ourselves. And our body parts will speak, and they will testify against us, and they will bear witness for us or against us. And imagine, that this mouth that we have, which has an opening, imagine if it is made smooth like your cheek. It is all just one surface, and that's it. It's closed. And you can't open your mouth now. You can't say, I meant to do this or I meant to do that. It's game over. These are the things that we need to reflect on, that we need to think about, that one day this mouth is going to be sealed. It's going to look like our cheek looks, like just one piece of skin, and we are not going to be able to speak. And we need to think that, what are we going to do on that day? Are we prepared for that? Are we, have we put those kind of things in our mizan where now we can say, yes, alhamdulillah, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to have my mouth sealed. I don't have to say anything in my defense, because I'm 100% confident that everything is good. So of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows that we are human beings, and He created us in such a way that He knows that we will make mistakes, and we make mistakes, and this is part of our humanity. But the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing is, what is the effort from our side to try and minimize those mistakes? What effort are we making to please Him, to do the things that are pleasing to Him, and to avoid the things that are displeasing to Him? So that is the test. The second thing is that Islam teaches us to be social, and it teaches us to mingle, to mix with the people. Islam does not instruct us to become monks and to become withdrawn and to not interact with anyone. But it instructs us to interact with people according to the guidelines set by the Prophet ﷺ, and of course by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we interact with people, but we interact in a within the boundaries that are set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see these boundaries being crossed over and over again. If you think about when you're chatting with your relatives or family, when you're sitting on the dinner table, when you're having a chat or a cup of tea with your friend, when you're even on WhatsApp, there are so many unnecessary things we say, and so many unnecessary sins we end up committing without even thinking about it, without even paying attention to it. It's just like I mentioned that hadith in the beginning, that we say something which we think is a really small thing. It's not a big deal, but maybe it's a very big deal in the sight of Allah. And that's why we have to be so conscientious. That's why we have to pay so much attention that what we are saying, is this something that is going to be pleasing to Allah, or is this going to be displeasing to Allah? It doesn't matter the size of that statement, that, oh, I just said this, or I just meant that. It doesn't matter, because if it is big in the sight of Allah, then you're finished just by one statement. So we have to be really careful. The third thing that we learn from this hadith is that a person is meant to speak as long as it is good for them, and he should be silent when it is good for him. So we have to think that what I'm saying, is this going to be for me or against me on the day of judgment? Because that's the day that it's going to really matter what you said. And it's also really going to matter what you held back from saying. And the Prophet ﷺ said, and like I said, the statement that I read before, that the Prophet ﷺ said that do not say any word that you will have to apologize for tomorrow. So don't put yourself in that situation. Number 4, the rights of neighbors are huge. And we need to try and step up our game. And we need to try and reach out as Muslims. We need to try and set a good example. Even just a courteous smile, a pleasant salam, occasional sending them, a box of dates or something pleasant, something nice. It goes a long way. Imagine what they say about you today. And then from there on, you decide what changes do I need to make. So you have to try and ask yourself that at this moment in time, what do I think my neighbor's opinion is of me? And whatever you think, you move from there forward. So if you think that it's a good opinion, alhamdulillah, that means you're doing what you had to do. And if you think that it's not such a good opinion, that means you need to, step up your game. You need to sort this out. We will be asked about this. We will be asked about, our behavior with each other, with our neighbors, with our friends and family. And even if you have, sometimes people say, oh, my neighbors are really weird. They're weird people. Like there was a sheikh, mashallah, he's like a student of knowledge, he's giving this talk and he's talking about neighbors. And he said, he lives in America. And he said, my neighbor is a punk. So, you might have neighbors like that, but that's where your Islam comes into action. So all these lectures that you're attending and all the lovely books you have read and all the durus you have attended, now it's time to put it into action. Now is the time, where your Islam should speak. It shouldn't be you, but it should be your Islam that speaks now, and it represents you and it represents your deen. So, this is really where you put your Islam into action. So it's one thing, that you have, everything has been academic so far, and now you put it into action. And the last thing is, of course, to the best of our ability. The last thing is the rights of the guest. And as Muslims, we are meant to be very hospitable to our guest. And again, we're talking about the guest who comes to stay. Of course, be nice to the person who's come to you for a cup of tea. I'm not saying that, you have to give them the worst things. But this particular, description that we're talking about is referring to the overnight guest. And the way you treat your guest, really, it reflects on you. It reflects on your upbringing. It reflects on your reputation. And so... really, it reflects your akhlaq. So the better your treatment of your guest, it reflects good on you. Just one of the things I forgot to read out to you, that Abu Bakr al-Jazairi, he said he mentioned a few things that are part of being courteous to the neighbor, because, sometimes it's like a very gray area, and you think, okay, how am I supposed to be nice to my neighbor? So I'm just going to tell you quickly a few things, and if you want, you can jot them down. So he said, helping them when they seek help, assisting them if they seek assistance, visiting them when they fall ill, congratulating them if something pleasing occurs to them, giving them condolences upon afflictions, helping them if they are in need, being the first to greet them, being kind in speech to them, being gentle in one's speech to the neighbor's children. I don't know if you've had like neighbors, yelling at your kids or something like that. It's very unpleasant. Guiding them to what is best for their religion and worldly life. So basically giving them nasiha if it's needed. Overlooking their mistakes. Not attempting to look into their private matters. And not constraining them with one's renovations or, like building works, etc. And not harming them by letting one's trash onto their property or in front of their house. So obviously, basically it all boils down to whatever you love for yourself, you should love for them. So, these are not things that you would like for yourself. So you should similarly, try and avoid them for them. And well, with that, we come to the end of the dars. So before I end, there was somebody who asked a question. They said that, what if your neighbors are nosy? And 1 second, let me just see what the question was. If it is someone new, you don't know them. Okay, so that was in a previous chat, so I don't have that. But yes, somebody was asking something like that. So again, like I said, if you feel that your neighbors are too nosy, and the main thing is courtesy. So sometimes you will have people who are, who are trying to pry into your private affairs. So just be courteous, and being polite is something, we are taught to be towards everybody. Even if people are being bad to us, we should still try and be courteous. So, to the best of your ability, try to be nice to them. Try to, be courteous with them. As long as you feel that in front of Allah, you have tried your best, you have tried to do what was in your capability with the, given neighbors you have, then inshallah you should be okay. So it should settle in your heart that I have tried my best and I have tried to do what I could do with my neighbors. So I think, each person can really answer that for themselves. But if that's not clear, you can ask again, or if there are any other questions you have before I, end the meeting, inshallah. Oh, okay. So the question I misunderstood because I hadn't read it properly. So what if your neighbor wants to stay away from you? Okay, so again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware that, you from your side are trying to be courteous and kind, and you're trying to show concern for the neighbor. But, if the neighbor is giving you the vibes, or he's giving you, the signals that, I'm not really too comfortable with this closeness, then, you maintain what I would say a comfortable distance, and you do what you feel is fulfilling their right. So if you feel that they need some help, you offer it to them. If you feel that they are, going through a difficult time, you offer your support, or you, if someone's passed away on their side, you just, offer your condolences. So you do it in a way which does not make them feel overwhelmed that, oh, this person is constantly in my face. But at the same time, you feel from your side, that you have tried your best. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is well aware of everybody's situation. So Allahu alam if, that is the right or the wrong answer, but that's to the best of my knowledge. So if there's no other questions, inshallah, we will end here. And if you have any other questions, you're welcome to send them in the private chat, or you can even send your questions on the Nawawi group for those of you who are on the group. And if you're not on the group, you're welcome to send your questions through your friends or whoever's sent you the link for the dars. So inshallah, with that, I hope that inshallah in this while we are in isolation and we're under a lockdown, that we appreciate Allah's blessings, and we have time to stop and reflect and think about all of Allah's blessings that we had, that we didn't appreciate, because we spend a lot of our time grumbling and complaining, really. So, this is a good opportunity to stop and reflect and to try and, you know, to try and tie up those loose ends within our own personalities, within our own character, and to try and improve ourselves as much as possible, because this is really a gift from Allah that we have this time to try and reflect on ourselves, on our family. Try and look at your household, your children, your tarbiyah, your relationship with your husband, your marriage, all the different aspects that maybe you have not focused on, or that you have neglected because of other things. So this is a really good time for us all to do that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with us, and may He remove this huge ibtila from us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring us close to Him through our istighfar, through our du'as at this time. And this is an opportunity for us to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, inshallah, next lecture next week will be a Ramadan reminder, and it's going to be with a heavy heart, because this is going to be a very different Ramadan. But inshallah, I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us to reach Ramadan, and that it will be one of our best Ramadans. With that, inshallah, I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Wa subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Barakallahu feekum, all of you. Okay, ladies, inshallah, I will end the meeting, and you're welcome to continue sending messages if you need to, on the group or through your friends, inshallah. It's very nice to have you all here, mashallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for taking out time for this, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who Allah has forgiven. Because that is one of the main benefits of these halaqat of remembrance, that the angels, they seek our forgiveness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who are forgiven. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.